Previously on the Vocal Minority.
Are you part of the silent majority? Or are you part of the vocal minority?
Motherfuckers, go! Attention, please!
If America can be saved, and I don't know if it's too late, but it'll be through radio shows like this new time.
This shit here feels like a whole entire world collapse.
The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers.
It's the vocal minority.
The revolution will be live.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Vocal Minority Report. It is your boy MC. As always, you could have downloaded any podcast in the world, but you're here with us. We appreciate that. Speaking of podcasts, we have on another host of a podcast, Bob Ruff from the Truth and Justice podcast. But like all of our other guests, he's much more than a podcaster. So we get into his story, his mission, and everything surrounding that. And we hope you guys who haven't listened to us before, hope you check out our last two episodes, episodes 119, Dear White America, Pain is Progress, and episode 120, our episode on the Dallas tragedy. And it also includes conversations on Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Black Lives Matter. We speak with the president of the Dallas Black Police Association. So please check out that episode. Go to iTunes, leave a rating, review, tell someone that you like the show. And as always, we'll talk to you after the conversation. Today's guest on the Vocal Minority Report is a retired fire chief, investigator, and host of the highly regarded and downloaded Truth and Justice podcast. He's the leader of a powerful army and maybe the hardest working man in Smith County, Texas, even though he lives in Michigan. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bob Ruff to the show.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for being here. Like I told you off air, big fan of yours. So really appreciate you coming on. So how's it going for you today?
It's going really well. Still at it at 9 o'clock at night. So this is actually a nice little break for me.
Good. It's funny. I imagine you sitting in front of, or sitting, wherever you are, there's pictures and documents and a recorder in front of you at all times. Like that's just, for some reason, that's my picture of you. Like no matter where you are,
It's not far from the truth.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, it must be, based on all the hard work you do. And so we'll get into that, but I want to talk about you and your background, but I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't get updates on everyone and everything that you're kind of dealing with, if you don't mind. I don't know if Adnan Syed, the most recent Kerry, Max Hooks, Kenny Snow, and Ed Aids too, but
sure. Yeah, so Adnan was and still continues to be a huge victory for us. And I tell people when I say us, I'm not speaking of the royal, the royal we. You mentioned in the outset here that the leader of a large army, and that's the hashtag that's been created on Twitter is the Truth and Justice Army. And the concept behind my show, for those that don't know, is it's a true crowdsourced project or movement. As far as investigation, any work that needs to be done, and just advocation and everything. So, everybody together is working towards a greater good in each individual case, and then hopefully in the future to affect long-term systematic reform in the criminal justice system. But so the Adnan Syed case was a huge victory. This was a case that was dead in the water, and I don't want to go into too much detail because I know your listeners, you had Asia on a few weeks ago, so they've heard, they're familiar with the case.
Right.
But just a couple weeks ago on the 30th of June, we got Judge Welch's ruling, and Adnan Syed's conviction has been vacated. He is no longer a convicted murderer. And that's
amazing.
That is in no small part. As a matter of fact, it's a direct link to the work that Susan Simpson did actually in the Undisclosed podcast. So,
right.
It's not specifically work that was done on my show. We covered the case. We've done a lot of investigation. The work that I do and kind of my listeners do will probably play a big part in the next step as far as we move into a new trial when the active investigation becomes a lot more relevant. But it's, what it shows is the power that an ordinary person can have to affect real change. Susan Simpson, Susan Simpson was a lawyer, and she liked cereal, started blogging about it. Robbie and Chowdhury contacted her, and Colin Miller was doing the same thing. They started the Undisclosed podcast, and through their work, they found information, and specifically the information regarding the cell phone towers in Adnan Syed's case that got his conviction overthrown. And so to me, that's incredibly encouraging, and it's just so powerful to think about the fact that this movement, this place we're in as a country and as a world, we're now in a place where normal guys like you and me, I was a fire chief a year ago,
right,
6 months ago, and normal people can stand up and unite a worldwide audience and make people listen, and that's exactly what happened in the Adnan Syed case. That's why his conviction was thrown out.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It's amazing, and I'm glad you mentioned Susan Simpson and everyone at Disclosed. I'm trying to get Susan on the show, by the way. That's another side note, but yeah, because so hint, but no, because the work that she did is incredible. All the work you did, though, you believe is going to be relevant in the next phase. Well, you just mentioned that. So you think you guys think there's going to be another trial or what's your speculation there? People are planning ahead, like that he's going to be retried.
I don't think that he will be tried again.
Okay.
But part of the reason that we'll probably end up with a conclusion of either them throwing out the charges, and giving him an actual innocence exoneration, or offering an Alford plea, will be because of the leverage that we've generated through the investigation.
Okay.
So what we're doing is we're preparing for a trial in case there is one. But the more real direct effect of that is basically we're flexing our muscles to the district attorney's office in Baltimore and kind of showing them, let's go ahead, take it to trial, and this is what we're going to hit you with. And I think it will serve as a deterrent. That's
Adnan. What about with Kerry Max Cooks in his fight currently?
Yeah, so I originally ended up landing in Smith County, Texas. Started in October last year, actually, while I was still reporting on Adnan's case. And I was starting to take on new cases. And I had a case brought to me. The guy in prison's name is Kenny Snow. He was a professional boxer. And so I took on his case, and he was, I believe, wrongfully convicted of robbery and an aggravated robbery, resulting in a 40-year sentence.
Right.
And so I started working on his case, and through his case, he was telling me, you need to read this book, Chasing Justice by Kerry Max Cook. It's another case out of Smith County. It's been called by legal scholars around the world as the worst case of police and prosecutorial misconduct in American history. And it was in Smith County. So I get this book and I read it, and I'm seeing the same names and the same characters that are involved in Kenny Snow's case in Kerry Max Cook's book. And so that led me to reaching out to Kerry Cook, and we kind of developed a friendship over several months. And the reason Kenny wanted me to look at it is because he told me, I have a crazy story to tell you. I'm going to tell you some of the craziest shit that you've ever heard happening in a courtroom or in a legal system, and you're not going to believe me unless you read this book and see that they've done it before.
Right.
So that led me to Kerry Max Cook. And then in the meantime, and so I'm going to get to the Kerry Max Cook conclusion, but just kind of show you the path of how I ended up there.
Oh, no problem.
In the meantime, Kenny also told me, you need to look at this guy named Edward H. Look at his case. Because the part of the shenanigans that went on with Kenny's case were that the prosecution forced him to get on the stand and lie and give false testimony against Edward H., which got him convicted to a life sentence for a murder that I can promise you he didn't commit after investigating this case. So then I started working Edward H.'s case as well, and we've had some developments there I'll get into in a minute too that have been pretty outstanding. And so it's also now I've got 3 cases in Smith County all at the same time down in Texas.
That's crazy. That is the one thing about your show where, it's a few months ago. Sometimes you do get caught up with, wait, who was he talking about? So
Right.
You've got to be a very astute listener and really read the show notes to really follow exactly. Now you make it very clear, obviously, when we're talking about Ed H., what case you're speaking of. But yeah, definitely, it's amazing how I'm glad you tied it together there, because sometimes, you can't get caught up in the stories.
Right. Yeah. So at that point, which and kind of what you're just talking about was one of the cool things when I decided to make this my full-time job and take an early retirement from the fire service. The episode where I announced that, I told my audience that this show is going to become dynamic. I'm not going to be locked into a script or a format. We're going to go where justice takes us, right? So when new cases come, if we got to switch over back and forth, and that's exactly what's happened over this time. I didn't plan on being right now, we're working these hours to try to work on 3 cases at once. It's just the way it went. But so it just up to, about a month ago, I considered Kenny Snow's case and Edward Aid's case as my cases. Those are the ones that I'm actively investigating. I'm taking trips down to Texas on a regular basis to investigate and interview witnesses. In Kerry Cook's case, I was just, for the most part, reporting on his case because in the midst of all this, Kerry Cook is a guy who was wrongfully convicted of a murder. He was sentenced to death row. Ended up serving, I believe, 20 years on death row. At one point was 11 days away from execution when one of his convictions were thrown out.
Wow.
The Smith County DA's office tried him 3 times, convicted him twice, and sentenced him to death row. And then right before the 4th trial is when they offered him an Alford plea about 20 years ago. So he's been out 20 years.
You've mentioned Alford plea a couple of times. I know what it is because I've listened to every episode of Undisclosed and all the other shows. But can you explain what an Alford plea is?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So an Alford plea is where in a situation much like in Non's case. Okay, so his conviction's been thrown out. So he's been granted technically a new trial, but the state may not take him into a new trial. So they have 3 options. The one option is they can drop all charges, so it's wiped off his record like it never happened. Or they can try him again. Or they can do what's called an Alford plea. And an Alford plea is where basically before another trial, the state would offer a deal. And the deal says if you plead no contest to your crime, then we will give you a sentence of time served, which basically means it's over with for you. So you plead no contest, you're sentenced to time served, it's done. So on your record, it's though you were convicted and you served your time and it's over with and you're out now.
Right. Okay. But you still are a convicted murderer or whatever your rapist, whatever your charge is. But you.
Yes.
But there's some level of concession. You're not spending the rest of your life or the rest of your sentence in prison. Okay. So I just wanted to, because a lot of people who listen have listened to Serial and and then some of our listeners are just, the first time they heard about Asia was when she was on the show. So I just want to make sure that some of them have that information.
The Alford plea is kind of a cop out for the state, and it's a carrot that they can dangle in front of almost anyone's face, and they're going to take it because basically what you're being faced with is a prosecutor telling you, if you'll just do this, you're done, and you get to go home for the rest of your life. If you don't, we're going to take you back to trial, and then you risk being convicted again and being sent back to prison. Even if you're innocent, what I've learned over this last year and a half and looking at all these cases is that juries are extremely fallible. Even if you have a straight-up prosecutor that's trying to do the right thing, there still can be mistakes made, and you can never predict what a jury's going to do. So most people aren't going to take that risk. If you're offering me the option to go home, I'm going to go home. But the reality of it is like you just said, once you go home, you're spending the rest of your life as a convicted felon, whatever your crime was.
Right.
And that's hard to live with. It's hard to get a job. I mean, there's Kerry Cook for the last 20 years has had, neighbors that won't let their kids play with his son because, for all they know, he's a convicted murderer. So that's what Kerry's been fighting for the last 20 years. Well, since he's gotten out, he's been trying to get an actual innocence exoneration. So he's home now, but he's been trying to fight to get that conviction complete, or basically drop the indictment. That the whole charge is thrown out based on actual innocence, so he'll no longer be a convicted murderer. And he actually finally got a court date this spring that just happened to be right in the middle of when I'm working these cases in Smith County. So he had on July 1st a hearing for actual innocence in the Smith County courtroom. and we're waiting on the judge's ruling. But it's a lot. You have to go listen to the podcast to hear all the details, or I could talk about it for 3 hours on here. But
right,
there's so much corruption around his case, even to this day, things that are being done. And so I've been reporting on it. And as I was preparing last week's podcast, which would be the report on what went down at his actual innocence hearing, for the first time, I really started to investigate the crime scene. And when I did that, I came across, basically I created a profile for the scene. If I was looking at this with brand new eyes, who are we looking for? And it came up with a pretty amazing, I keep trying to find the right adjective, but a pretty crazy conclusion about who the murderer was. So this whole time, it's either been the people that think Carrie Max Cook did it, or the people that think the victim's boyfriend did it.
Okay.
And it's been one or the other. And when I looked at the crime scene, I came up with a very different conclusion, and it seems to have kind of blown the socks off of everybody. And actually, this week, I don't know when your episode airs, but my episode that'll come out here on this weekend, on the 17th, on Sunday, has an interview that is going to knock everybody's socks off. So. I'm
going to put this one out on Monday, the day after yours comes out. So yeah, it'll be fresh. So, okay.
Okay. Yeah. So Carrie's case, where it's at right now, is he's just kind of waiting on a judge's ruling, and there's not much we can do with it from there. But his is a case that's, after a 40-year struggle, he at least finally got back into that courtroom. And then Carrie's original hearing was at the beginning of June, and he had 8 grounds for actual innocence. And his attorneys had been working with the DA's office to try to make a deal where they will agree to actual innocence. And they had made a deal prior to that hearing. And when they went in, the prosecution agreed to vacate his conviction. So as of right now, he's no longer a convicted murderer. But in exchange for doing that, they had to throw out all of the other grounds and only do a hearing on actual innocence. And Carrie was originally okay with that, but then after it happened, you talk about post-traumatic stress. I mean, the guy spent 22 years on death row being beaten and raped and mutilated, and it was all due to this intentional misconduct. And he kind of, I don't want to say flipped out, but I mean, he just got to an emotional state where he was just furious. And he fired his attorneys for, and one of the big problems was that his attorney kind of praised the district attorney he did.
Right.
Matt Bingham did such a great thing for working with us, and Carrie just couldn't stomach it.
Thanks for filling us in on that. And then, to get to Kenny Snow and Ed Ates.
Yeah. So the Kenny Snow case, like I said, the original one that I started with, Kenny's a guy who made some mistakes back in the day that he acknowledges now, but he's a guy that wants to make things right, and so he insisted that I look into this Edward Ates case. And so the Edward Ates case, when I look into it, it was the murder of not his next door neighbor, but one house away, of a 47-year-old woman when he was, I think, 25 at the time, who was brutally beaten and her throat slit. And when I started looking at the evidence in the case, I could see right away, the evidence does not line up with this guy. So I reached out to him cold turkey. I sent him a letter like, "Hey man, I'm Bob, and and I want to look at your case."
Right.
And then he's just like, "Well, what? Okay, well, I guess. What do you want to know?" And so for the last 3 or 4 months, I've been working his case, and we worked it to the point where we were able to secure the Innocence Project of Texas as of last month.
That's amazing.
Has actually taken on his case and is now preparing to start litigating and filing motions to get Ed Ates out of prison.
That's amazing. I mean, the fact that you were able to get their support and you've done the level of research. Obviously, I listened to the episode there where you kind of handed off the baton to the attorney and introduced her and them. And then I know your association with the Texas Tech Law School as well, right? Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I guess so now we'll shift and get into you and your background. We talked about it a little bit, but just your background and your story from fire chief and investigator to now this, warrior for justice. That sounds extremely cliche, but because sometimes when I first heard you actually introduce or mention the Army term, I kind of grimaced a little bit. I was like, oh man, but but now that I'm so vested in these cases and in your work, and so let's talk about fire chief, investigator. Let's talk about that, and then you talked about recently retiring. How you kind of shifted. So
yeah, my story's pretty. I think it's kind of interesting and it's unique. I mean, I became a professional podcaster, justice warrior,
right.
by accident, really. I've been a firefighter since early 2000, and I'd worked my way through the ranks of the fire department until 2012. I was promoted, took the job as the fire chief. So I'd made it through the ranks, and throughout my career there, one of the areas that I specialized in was in arson investigation, or just cause and origin fire investigation, not just for arsons. We have to investigate every fire and determine what the cause was and where the origin of the fire was. And it's something that's part of any fire officer's job, and it's just a part that I really enjoyed and I seem to have a knack for.
Okay.
And also during that time, I took a position as the director of fire science at our local college here, where I taught fire cause and determination there. And so I always like to focus on not only the forensic crime scene reconstructions, but also the behavior aspects of it, witness interrogation and interviewing and those skills and tactics and things. So in any case, that was kind of my background. I was a firefighter up to being a fire chief and a fire investigator. And the only reason that's relevant is so I have this kind of investigator's skill set kind of in my toolbox that just happened to come in handy later. And so during the fall of 2014, during the fall of 2014, I, me and 30 million of my friends all
right.
all kind of got hooked with Serial. And so I listened to Serial, and of course I loved it like everybody else. And except for I was kind of crazy, kind of a nerd about it. I mean, I just had this kind of inquisitive mindset in general, and as I was listening to it, I'm trying to wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, or go back. And so I'm doing crazy things like going back and re-listening to this episode and comparing this statement to that statement. And I started writing notes, and by the time Serial was over, then I've listened to it 2 or 3 or 4 times and trying to find anybody I could find that wanted to talk about it. I mean, I was convinced I was going to solve this case, right? just from myself sitting up here after listening to 12 episodes of Serial, I had it down.
Right.
But the problem I found is that I was the only nerd that I knew, and none of my...
Hey, tell me about it, man. Tell me about it. That's the whole reason I found your show, which is what you're getting to. But right, I got you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could, nobody wanted to talk. Even people that I knew that listened to it were like, "Yeah, it was cool." Well, what do you think about this? I don't know, man. I listened to it while I was driving. I was like, shut up, let's go do something else.
Right.
Yeah. So, so my podcasting career began with in Christmas of 2014. My mother-in-law. Now, before I get into this, I want to remind you all that I am a grown-ass man. But my mother-in-law gave me $200 for Christmas.
Well, I was wondering why you were giving that disclaimer, but okay, now it makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, my mother-in-law still gives my wife and I Christmas gifts, and she couldn't figure out what to get for me, so she gave me $200.
Dude, you know what? I gotta get married again. Actually, that sounds pretty awesome now that I think about it. But go ahead. Yeah, I gotta get married again. Set of
in-laws, right?
Right.
So I had always had this dream of it wasn't always a podcast, but so one thing that happens around a fire department is every day around the table in the morning after all your morning truck checks are done, is everybody sits down and has coffee and we shoot the shit. And the conversations when we do that they're ridiculous. There's a certain type of personality that's drawn into the fire service. Your type A, controlling, asshole, smart ass type personalities. And it creates some pretty funny conversations. So for years, I always would say, we need to record this. Somebody needs to record these conversations. Because we'd be in tears laughing during these conversations every day.
Right.
And so once kind of podcasting became a thing, that was always like our joke. Like, we should make a podcast. Like, we should podcast about doing this, even though none of us actually knew what that entailed. It was his idea, right? So I get this $200 from my mother-in-law, and I decide, you know what? I wonder if I get on Amazon. I'm like, here's a kit that has everything I need to make a podcast. So I'm going to buy this kit. The first thing I found out was that thing did not have everything I needed to start a podcast, but it was close. I mean, anybody really can do this with very little equipment. But I just needed to set up the content on 4 microphones for what I wanted to do. But anyway, so I upgraded the mixer and bought a couple more mics. So I'm about $300 into this. And on Valentine's Day in 2015, so just over a year ago, I started the off-duty podcast. It was myself and 2 other firefighters, and then we would have a guest every week and just sit around and drink coffee or beer if it's in the evenings and shoot the shit.
Okay.
And so that leads us to about May last year, and I was sitting one night. My 4-year-old son was homesick, so I was home with him, and I was bored. And so, of course, I'm going through my serial notes like any normal sane person would do.
Yes, as one does. Right, I got you. Right.
And as I'm going through them, I was like, man, and I thought, you know what? I got that recording equipment downstairs. I should make another podcast. I mean, it doesn't. When you start a podcast and nobody's listening, it doesn't cost anything, right? So I was like, screw it.
That's the story of my life. So yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, you can pretty much do whatever you want on it too when no one's listening.
Right.
So I decided, I'm gonna get this idea, and I quickly went on to GoDaddy, and I bought a domain, and I was trying to think of like what would be the name of it, and it was like, because what I wanted to do was make friends. So like,
you needed some other serial nerd friends. Is that what
exactly?
Okay.
That's exactly. So my idea was, I'll start this podcast where I'll say, everybody email me in all your ideas and theories, and then I'll talk about them on the podcast, because there's got to be other people like me out there like this. So I decided, it's about not just cereal, but about all these podcasts about cereal. So that's why I called it the Cereal Dynasty, because it was this dynasty of podcasts, right? So I bought cerealdynasty.com and threw together a quick little website and an email address, and then I went in my basement and recorded a 15-minute episode where I basically said, hey, I'm Bob, you don't know me, I'm weird, you probably are too, send me in your emails, and we'll talk about the show. And so that's how it started, and then it just snowballed. It was somehow, and I don't even know how this happened, like, it was like the first episode, all of a sudden, was like within a week, I'm like, holy crap, I got 4,000 downloads.
Right.
Which my other podcast, which I still do weekly, by the way, go listen to the Off-Duty Podcast, people.
No doubt.
Still,
yeah.
Still doesn't have 4,000 downloads after a year and a half. But so like people, I was like, people are listening, and I really I put out in that episode, send me in your theories. I'm thinking, maybe I get 1 or 2. I mean, and it's like the first week I got like 50 emails from people, and so I did the next episode, and I read the emails and the theories, and I kind of commentated on them as though I had the authority or the knowledge to do that.
Right.
For some reason, people listened when I did that. And this thing just somehow it evolved, and I can't. People ask me all the time, like, when did you decide to be actively investigating these things? And I don't know when it was, because it kind of started. People would send these emails and here's my theory. What do you think, Bob? And I literally, full disclosure here, was thinking, why the hell do you care what I think?
Right.
Who am I? But it's I gave my opinion, and then
folks, thought you knew what the hell you were talking about.
Yeah, they think you know what you're doing because you're on the radio or whatever you call the podcast. If they only knew.
Exactly. Let's not peel back the curtain too much. Right. Yeah. Right. Let's not. We don't want to show everybody how the sausage is made. So go ahead.
Right on. Yeah. And so as this went on, it was about midsummer. I kind of got to the point where, because I was kind of reporting on what Undisclosed was doing, I was kind of being the layperson for them, kind of taking their legalese and turning it into language that people could understand maybe a little more clearly, or kind of breaking it down. Because that's kind of my background too, is as a teacher. So I always said that's what teaching is: taking the complicated and making it simple and understandable.
Okay.
So I was doing that, and then I started to hit parts of the case where it was like, man, this thing here is bugging me. And nobody else is talking about it. So all of a sudden, I started making phone calls. I'm like, well, shit, all these people on the podcast seem to care what I have to say, so I'm just going to start calling people. And so I started calling and contacting witnesses and doing interviews and figured some things out that no one else was figuring out. And then the audience was growing and growing and growing, and then it became this like crowdsource thing. That's where the whole term the Truth and Justice Army came from. That wasn't something that I created. It was my listeners. Like, what do we got? I think one time I said I've got an army behind me, and somebody jumped in on it, and it's kind of stuck. And I always like kind of cringed at it. It was really cliche at the beginning, but as time's gone on, now that army's 200,000 plus strong, and it's literally
and you've been able to affect change too, and that's probably because I've softened on the term now. So just to make it so yeah, I wonder if because you guys have actually you've done something, you've conquered some things,
Yeah, and it is corny, but then at the same time, for example, of how this thing works is. In the Edward Yates case, I had a phone number on a call log that I needed to track who it was, and nothing like the new age, all the computer programs, the background search programs I have, nothing was working. I couldn't find this number, so I decided to go old school, and I called the Kilgore Public Library in Texas and say, "Hey, you don't happen to have a 1993 phone book, do you?" They're like, "Yeah, we got one sitting right here."
Oh wow!
Except for I'm in Michigan, so. I literally tweet out, hey, Truth and Justice Army, I have a mission. Who's going to be around the Kilgore area next week? And I get 15 people that email me like, hey, I've been waiting for you to give me something to do. What do you want? And one of my listeners went to the public library and sat there all day. And literally, this was not a name. I had a phone number. So they had to scan through every phone number in that book to find the name that was attached to it. And they did it while they were there.
Wow.
So that's just an example, but anything that we need done, and that's partially why the Innocence Project got involved in Ed's case. Is number one, is a compelling case, but between myself and the listeners, we were able to do so much of the work on the case already ahead of time. And so when I brought it to them, and even the connection with the Innocence Project was from my listeners. Darby Dickerson, who's the dean of the Texas Tech University School of Law, was a listener.
Okay.
And so when I said, hey, I've got when I started talking about a case in Texas, she's like, oh, hey, I've got some law students here that would love to work on that. And she's the one that said, hey, let me give you the personal email address and phone number of the executive director of the Innocence Project, which I hope she had permission to do that when she did it.
Well, right. Well,
but, and so it was a listener that made that connection for me. And then for the Innocence Project, I was part of my pitch with them when I was going over the case with them. And it was literally, they're like, well, we're going to need this, this, and this. I'm like, I can get it. And I'd go get it and come back, and they go, okay, well, we still need this. And I'd go get it and come back. And then it was, well, number one, it's a case that they believe he's innocent, and they believe it's a case they can win. But they got to that point because early in the process, when they were deciding whether to even look at it, was a big piece of that was me telling them, listen, you have the resources of hundreds of thousands of people from around the world. Literally anything you need, I can get done.
Right.
With these people. And so that for me, it's like, it's just, it wells me up with pride, not in myself, but just to be a part. I'm the one with the microphone, but for me, just to be a part of a group of people, a movement like that is just so focused and so willing to do whatever they can to help out, to do some good in this world. With everything's going bad in this world, there's all these people that are willing to do anything they can to do something good. And I just love being a part of it.
I mean, we just did 2 episodes. Well, we're in Dallas, number one, and that's important for a couple reasons, obviously.
Right.
Our relation to Smith County, number one, because my brother's in Louisiana. I drive through Kilgore, East Texas. I drive through East Texas all the time, so I'm always very mindful. I think I even sent you a picture one day when I was driving.
Yeah.
I'm always very mindful and thoughtful when I go through there. Now, I would have never thought about it, prior to probably.
Be careful about being black when you drive through there.
Hey, who you telling, man? When I'm seriously, I promise you, every time, and I go see my brother, it's 3 hours, so I go every other weekend or a couple times a month, right? But I'm always like, man, I don't want to. Yeah, I'm driving 70 and I'm chilling, and I don't want any issues. I want driving through here because. don't want any issues in general, obviously, because who knows what could happen. Clearly, look at the news, but and then obviously I was just mentioning the Dallas thing and the shows that we've done here recently about all the tragedies, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, the 5 officers in Dallas. We actually talked to the president of the Dallas Black Police Association of Greater Dallas. And I mentioned that because some people who might be listening to this episode who haven't checked me out before by virtue of you. So anyway, this episode they should check out. But anyway, I say that to say though, that in this time, as you mentioned, this country we're plagued with so many things but these wrongs and these injustices that you are in your army and everyone is working on, they really cut across race, religion, gender, class. I mean, the whole spectrum, right? I mean, because Adnan Syed is, Pakistani American, Muslim. Kerry Max Cook is a white man, and then I've had AIDS, and Kenny Snow are brothers. See, those are the 4 we're speaking of, but there's countless others. So to have your army and the people who support, helping you be so involved in trying to right all these wrongs and injustices in this time is super important. So, so the work that everyone's doing, we need that, especially, based off, another podcast, which is crazy, like we had Rebecca Lavoie of the podcast Crime Writers on the show, and I asked her 2 questions I wanted to ask you. One was about, the cottage industry of shows, not to trivialize the shows. They're different shows and what their missions and outcomes are. But what's your opinion on just all the shows that were born out of Serial, and then now that they've had to shift, including your show, Undisclosed, everybody's kind of had to shift now, and kind of how that's just happened. Like, what do you think about that? We've kind of talked about you and your trajectory, but what do you think about the overall picture of that?
I think it's amazing. I mean, it's incredible, really. So Serial opened the world's eyes to a lot of things that they were unaware of before. One being the fact that there's a thing called a podcast.
Right. No doubt. Right.
For starters. And then, they were the first source of media that really had that broad and wide of a reach worldwide, exposing the possibility of corruption within a prosecutor's office. People have talked about it here and there, but it's never been anything anyone was ever really focusing on. I mean, Making a Murderer, the TV show,
right,
or the Netflix show, all these podcasts that are springing up one after another. I mean, they all get their roots from Serial. And it was, and I don't think that was ever Sarah Koenig's intention. I think her intention, that's what people were surprised about the Bo Bergdahl thing this year. And I don't want to put words in Sarah Koenig's mouth, but my impression always was, like I was saying all along, like her next season will not be a true crime. She was not intending to be a true crime podcast. It was about the format of being a serialized podcast.
Right. It was an extension of This American Life. So the stories would take on anything.
Right. Right.
It would just be serialized. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it just, the effect that it had, which may have been an unintentional effect, has been that literally millions of people around the world are now involved, and we are forcing the justice system and the legislature even to pay attention, and we've become these microphones that myself and you and all of these other podcasts that have come out. These microphones that we have sitting on our desks are forcing people to listen. They can't ignore us anymore. There's too many of us. I mean, I encourage anyone and everyone that even has a inkling of starting a podcast like this to do it. I mean, there's some great, there's Brooke, and I can't pull her last name at the moment, but a girl right here from in northern Indiana, right near me, started the Actual Innocence podcast, where she's interviewing exonerees. The Generation Y podcast.
Right.
There's so many of them, and I don't want to start listening because I'll miss a bunch. But I think that it's giving people a voice. And so my opinion of, because some people will kind of look down on it and say, well, everybody's just going to jump on this band. Well, who? I don't know what your rules are. You can bleep this out, but who fucking cares?
Oh no, hey, yeah, no. I love it when the guests cuss because I know you're comfortable and you feel. So yeah, no, hey, no. Who fucking cares? You goddamn right. Yeah, do your thing. Right.
Because it's like, so what? Whatever's motivating someone or whatever. But I love the idea for people to have a voice. And what you touched on a minute ago has been, it's brought me to tears on a number of occasions. The fact that another unintended effect of this is kind of the breakdown of the curtain of racism and sexism and classism, at least within this army, to where like we this, I keep air quoting army, but is so diverse and is so willing to accept, and we're looking at a person. Carrie Max Cook was at the time, but back in the 70s, a bisexual poor white guy, and like you said, Adnan Syed, a Pakistani American Muslim, and then you have Kenny Snow, who was at the time a drug addict, poor black man, and then Edward Yates, who was also a poor black man, and it's like, and none of that matters. I've spoken in a mosque with Rabia Chowdhury. Myself, the most privileged human being on earth, the straight white Christian man. It's been eye opening for me to be able to be a part of these cultures and communicate with these people. It's just been incredible.
What do you think explains? Because it's kind of twofold here, right? Where it's shining a light on these injustices and people being moved by, Serial, and then obviously the Making a Murderer. And let me throw out a movie here that I just watched on Netflix. It's called David and Me. I recommend it to everyone. It's about another wrongful conviction and a guy's fight to get out of jail, convicted in New York. And he had Reuben Hurricane Carter fighting for him and some other people. But anyway, it's called David and Me. It's on Netflix, and people should check it out. But I digress. So anyways, but getting back to that. So, but it's kind of like we had a true crime obsession, or at least I know I did anyway. And then when you, and I've always been interested in social justice issues and injustice. This movement, my question is, so people, what do you think about, our obsession with true crime and punishment in general? And, we say true crime a lot too, but, I think a lot of folks are enjoy the punishment phase or are interested in that as well. So any thoughts on that kind of aspect and how that lends itself to this, your army, or even, the folks on Reddit that are the detractors, and just all of our focus on true crime in general?
Well, I think that, true crime has been something that, people around the world have been interested in, for decades, and whether we're reading about it or listening to it or watching it on television. But that's always been a passive entertainment for most people. What's happened with what's happening now with the podcast movement and specifically in what we're doing is we're giving people the opportunity to be involved, and it's not about entertainment. For example, like when I was covering Adnan's case about Serial, my listenership was a little. It's probably about leveled off now, but it was higher. When I moved on to another case, I saw a big drop in listenership, and
right.
It was there was a big portion of those people that were there for entertainment, and they just cared about that story. But then what's been built back up over the past several months as we've started working on other cases is people that want to be actively involved, and this gives them the outlet to do that. And I think what it's shown me, and I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but from my perspective, what it's shown me is the world, despite of how bad it looks on the news, this world is full of good people that want to do good things for this world, and they've just never had the outlet. And shows like mine, and even yours, giving people a voice, and Undisclosed, and all these other shows, and all these things that are happening, we are finally that outlet to give people the opportunity to do something good, and it's an opportunity they never had before. People, the single mother, the single dad, the people that are grinding it out 60 hours a week just to put food on the table. have always had this mindset of, I would love to make a difference, but I can't because I'm just this one person.
Right.
And I think what we're showing them is that, yes, you can, and here's an opportunity to do it. And they're taking it.
Yeah, no, right. You can certainly be a movement, be it a small movement or a large movement, but you can certainly affect change. So yeah, no, that you answered the question. Yeah. All right. Let's shift now, because you mentioned prosecutorial misconduct, and I wanted to get into that because all these things have certainly shined a way more of a light on that. But I wanted to ask you about, do you think prosecutorial misconduct and ineffective assistance of counsel is rampant? Like, I realize the ineffective assistance claim isn't always as literal as the title would imply. A lot of times it can be, as making a murderer, I think taught us, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to someone you believe is innocent, to, you can fall on the sword, if you will. Now, there are a lot of times though, like with, Christina Gutierrez, who failed at non, and you mentioned this in one of your episodes, how Edward A's lawyers must not have remembered what Francis Johnson said 10 minutes earlier. So, right. Yeah. And that's just one example, but I made a note of that when I heard you say it, because it's like, there's so many examples of, both prosecutorial misconduct and ineffective assistance of counsel. So just give me your thoughts on both of those.
So first, with prosecutorial misconduct, I think that the majority of prosecutors, I don't think that it's something that's running rampant. Now, and I should specify, I don't think intentional prosecutorial misconduct is something that's running rampant. Where the extreme cases, like what we've seen in Don Sayed's case and Edward A's case and Kerry Cook and Kenny Snow, those, well, even in the Making a Murder, Stephen Avery's case, but
right.
I think those are the exception, not the rule.
Okay.
For the most part, I think most prosecutors aren't intentionally just doing crazy things like that. But
hey, well, you know what? Well, let me ask you a quick question though. So, do you think that, and this is just, I'm spitballing, is that because most cases are plead out anyway, so they don't have the opportunity to be dirty? Because the number of cases, at least my understanding is, that actually go to trial is not, it's not a lot. Most cases are played out, correct? Well, right. Would you? So
yeah, that is true for sure. The fact that a lot of them play out certainly plays a part in it, but I think the reason I don't believe that it's really all that, it's not rampant throughout, every single DA's office in the country, is because they don't need it to be. The prosecutor's office, the deck is stacked against the defense in every single case they walk into, for a couple of reasons. Number one, the jury, normal human beings from whatever town the case is in, have an inherent belief, or at least they have had, that the police and the prosecutors are the good guys. So the person that they're trying to convict probably did it. That's the linchpin of the American criminal justice system, is the fact that you're innocent until proven guilty. But the reality of it is that's almost never the case.
Right.
People just don't believe that. So they already have that going for them. And then they also have going for them that they get to present their case. They're the ones that are trying to prove guilt. And so the defense is then poised to have to kind of play defense. They don't know what the prosecutor's going to say. They have the discovery file, but
and they also have the benefit of, you know how the police, when they arrest someone, they get to tell the whole story. They right. Also, because the cases are often, put in the media way before the guilty person. Because when the police make the arrest, they're talking. So yeah, they get the jump way early in the investigations. I just want to throw that in there too, because I don't know that everyone realizes that. Because I know in Dallas specifically, you can go in almost any big case or any felony, like of note. There's a press conference that's done, daily, weekly, that spells out from the police perspective the whole case, and that's reported, and so I don't know that everyone realizes that, so when you talk about the deck being stacked against people, that it starts super early in the process. So
no, I agree with you 100%, and that's and basically, if you kind of put yourself in the mindset of what position would you rather be in, to be the person that gets to start things out and you get to present your case in your way, and you get to present a narrative? Or would you rather be in the position of the person that has to wait to hear that and then decide how to combat it on the fly, which is the position defense attorneys are in? It's like fighting a one-armed man,
right?
So that's why I say I don't. In most cases, prosecutors they don't need to have all that misconduct because they have the upper hand already going into the trial, and then you also have the fact that, I mean, a lot of times what it comes down to, whether you're convicted or not in an actual trial, in a full trial, especially a long one, which like a murder is going to be a couple of weeks at least, is who can tap into the jurors' emotions in their closing arguments the best. And it's sad, but that's what it really. I'm actually going to Baltimore next week to give a speech in front of a bunch of judges and lawyers about this exact issue, and how to expect I always put it like this. Imagine you're teaching a class with 12 people. Because as a teacher myself, I always think about this. I can present the material that I'm trying to teach in the best way I know how, and do my best to try to make sure everybody gets it. And at the end of the day, the end of the week, when I give a test, there's going to be probably 2 of those people that are going to ace it. There's going to be 2 of them that are going to flunk it. And there's going to be 8 of them that are going to be somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And that's essentially what you're doing in a trial is trying to teach the jurors what you want them to believe. And the idea to think that all 12 of them are going to get it and get it right it's insane. It's nonsense. It's not going to happen. What's going to happen in that jury box is whoever has the strongest opinion and is the most persuasive in the deliberation room is who's going to win. And I've seen that in literally every single one of my cases that's gone to trial. You see I guess not in Adnan's case, but like in Edward H.'s case, for example, jury was deadlocked for 3 days, sending notes to the judge over and over again. He dynamited the jury twice, telling them, like, you're not going home until you come up with a verdict, when they're writing him notes saying we can't come up with a verdict.
Right.
And then so eventually he sends this note and says that for the second time, the dynamite, the third day, when they wanted to go home at 5 o'clock, and he says, you're not going home until you come up with a verdict. Guess what? They came up with a verdict. The 3 people that refused to come off the fact that Edward H. was innocent suddenly changed their mind. Well, did they change their mind because the evidence changed? No, they changed their mind because they wanted to go home, and the man's been sitting in prison for 18 years since then because of that, because they wanted to get home for dinner.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, and so I just had to throw my little side notes in here, and I don't know if you watched that OJ, the 30 for 30, OJ Made in America, really, really great actually. But anyway, they had some of the jurors on there from the OJ case, and when they asked one of them, an older black lady, about the deliberation and how short it was, and she said, and I'll misquote her, but she basically said we were ready to go. So, so yeah, I mean, like, point blank, and obviously, I don't want to debate that the merits of that, whatever, but her overall point was, I mean, how could you be here for 8 months or whatever, and you take less than an hour or however, and she said, hey, we were ready to go. So at that point, so I don't know that everyone understands the stress that a jury, and you know what, and I've never had jury duty, so I wouldn't even. Which is weird. I know a lot of people who haven't had it. I know a lot of people. My mother, I swear she gets jury duty like every 6 months. I've never had it, but I can't imagine what the jury goes through and how much fatigue and how much pressure from the judge can play into that as well. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and a lot of it is emotion. I did sit on a jury a couple of years ago for an armed robbery case, and it was clear that, I mean, this guy was guilty. The evidence was clear. His whole argument was that not that he didn't do it, but that someone forced him to do it, which seemed to be a bullshit argument to me and everybody but 2 of the people in the room. We had to deliberate for almost a full day because 2 people in that room, based on emotion, didn't want to convict. They literally said, yes, I believe he did it. Yes. And we're okay. The law says if he did this, this, and this, guilty. Do you believe that? Yes. So guilty. I just don't think he should be convicted. And, so again, it was emotion, and it went on forever. And you're trying not to, And admittedly, I was in the same position. Luckily, I wasn't the foreman, so I just kind of had to sit there and watch. But I'm thinking, it's like, God, I want to just tell this woman, like, hey, I want to go home. Let's do this.
Right.
And looking back on that now that I know more about the system, it's messed up that I even had those thoughts. But that's the reality of our system. So, and to the other half of your question, which was about the ineffective assistance of counsel, I think that is much more commonplace, and like you said, not exactly the way it sounds on its face, but just defense attorneys, number one, they are, like I said, they're in the underdog position going in, and they're having to be reactive. The prosecutor has planned for months what he's going to say in that trial, and the defense attorney has 5 minutes to listen to him and to come up with a response to it. But so you have that aspect of it, and which is going to cause you to miss things and make mistakes, and along the way. And then you have the fact that so many cases are defended by court-appointed attorneys, and that's not an insult. Court-appointed attorneys are just as good as any other attorney out there, and their dedication is even more. I mean, these are people that are getting paid less to do a lot more,
right?
And they're defending people that they can't afford to defend themselves. So I have all the respect in the world for them, but the reality of it is there's no funding for court-appointed attorneys like there should be. And so you'll have a court-appointed attorney that might have 35 cases on their docket that they're trying to prepare for, and they don't have, and they have to go ask the judge, can I have some money, or whoever they have to ask, I need some money to hire an expert witness. Well, there's nothing in the budget for that, so he doesn't get an expert witness, because, expert witnesses are expensive. And so because of that, they don't have the time they should have to prepare. They don't have time to, like I can tell you Edward Aid's case back and forth, every little detail, because I've been living that case, only that case, for all these months. I couldn't imagine. Like, even right now, I'm kind of juggling 3 with Kenny Snow and Ed Aids and Carrie McCook all at the same time. And I'm already I've had to change my filing system so that I can keep track of it. I couldn't imagine having to actively defend more than even one case at a time, much less, 10, 15, 20, 30 cases at once. So I think IAC, or the ineffective assistance of counsel, is much more commonplace.
That's why this adversarial system we have is not the best system, but that's a whole nother show. But
yeah.
Let me
know when you do that one. I'll come on.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, right. So it'll take so long to even set that one up, but yeah, that's a whole nother one. But okay, so then I guess we'll get into. We talked about you being an investigator and the things you've discovered in all of your research and investigation here now, and your trips to Texas. But I wanted to ask you, and I'll speak about, I'll kind of go inside baseball here on some of these cases because you know them well. A lot of people listening know them well, but so I'll mention some names that folks may not be familiar with, but they're not really important to the overall story. But so when you make your discoveries, like with Don or Francis Johnson, or you uncover misconduct or deceit on the part of police prosecution, how does that make you feel? And I know that we've talked about it just kind of generally, but when you specifically uncover something, so what goes through your head when you make these initial discoveries, or what are you kind of thinking there?
There's usually a mixture of emotions. I mean, to be honest with you, usually my first thought or emotion is kind of anger. I can't tell you how many times I've had what I call my what the fuck moments.
Right.
When I'll be reading through something and it's just like, holy shit, like this, I can't believe this happened, and then it's like, I can't believe the prosecution allowed this to happen or made this happen. I can't believe the defense didn't catch it. I can't believe that because I get close with these guys. I talk to Ed and Kenny on the phone. Ed, especially right now, at least twice a week. We become friends, and it's just so that I have this personal connection. It's like, you bastards, So that's kind of first, but then they also usually you'll bring hope. It's immediately followed by hope. Like, this might be something we can use. If I can, I can prove this. This is something that we can actually take to court and use to get him out of there. So it's kind of a mixture of both of those.
Can we talk about Don specifically? I don't know how much you want to say, or
we can. Yeah, we can. I mean, we can a little bit. If it's there's with how do I put this, with with the case being in the position it's in right now, I'm limited on what I can talk about. But feel free to ask me whatever you want, and I'll just tell you if it's something I can't get into.
Okay, so with everything that you've uncovered around Don and all the forensic countermeasures, that might be my new favorite phrase out of all this, forensic countermeasure. Because every time I watch something now, I think that way. That might be one of the biggest things that come out of this. This really is that I'm so much more educated and passionate about these things now, where I'm looking for forensic countermeasures in different things that I'm watching, or reading, so it's, you've done a tremendous service, you and, Jim Clemente specifically, I guess, for that term, or at least hipping me to that. But with all the discoveries that you've made, and I know you took some heat at that one of those live events about who you thought was the number one suspect. So I guess my question is, how confident, or what's your level of confidence that actually Don is a suspect, is a very viable suspect?
I'm very confident in saying that he is a prime suspect. I mean, I did take some heat for that, and people were saying, "Oh, he's accusing somebody of murder." I'm not accusing anybody of murder. I'm saying my opinion is that he is the prime suspect, and what I will say is that I am 100% confident that he falsified his alibi intentionally before her body was found. And you mentioned forensic countermeasure. That's a pretty damn big one. And,
right.
And his story doesn't line up. A lot of his behaviors tend to lead me towards the fact that he is someone who is a really good candidate to be a suspect. And even the profile of the crime scene that Jim Clemente did, he fits the profile. So he's got a lot of things stacked against him regarding as far as him being a good candidate for a suspect for this murder. It doesn't mean he did it. He could have faked his alibi for some other reason, but it doesn't look good for him. And then there's the fact that he, if there's another side of the story, then he has the opportunity to give it. I've offered him the opportunity to give it. I've given him, his mother, and his stepmother all the invite to come on the show and explain things, and they've declined. So,
and what contact have you actually? I know they've declined, but in what? And I know you've mentioned this probably on previous episode of your show, but what has that contact been like? Have you had direct contact with Don where he's said, I'm not coming on your show, or has it been through an intermediary, or what contact have you had with those three people? Has it been direct, and how's that gone?
I had direct contact with Don, and I told him that I found some things. This is early on in the investigation. I told him that I found some things regarding his timesheet that don't look real good, and I'd love to talk to him. And if there's an innocent explanation for that, I would love to hear it and give him the opportunity to explain that. And he told me that you have the wrong person. And then
okay.
As I told him that I can assure you that I do not have the wrong person. But if you don't want to comment, that's fine. And he chose to decline to comment. And this was very brief.
So he didn't even acknowledge that he was the Don. He didn't even acknowledge that. Oh wow.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. He just said that I had the wrong person. I said no, I don't, and I explained to him how I know that I don't. And that was that was the end of that.
Okay.
And his mother, I have not had direct contact with her. I've sent direct contact to her, but she has never responded to anything. The stepmother, my contact with her was much later into the investigation, because I didn't know that she was his stepmother at the beginning of the investigation. And so once I had figured that out, of course, I knew a lot, even more than what I had talked about on the podcast. And so I sent her a pretty long message explaining to her everything that I found and I know, and that if there's innocent explanations for any or all of this, I want to make sure that I give a balanced report. And if they would like to explain it, I would like to give her the opportunity to do so. And I could see that it was through Facebook Messenger.
Okay.
And I could see when she read it, and then about 2 hours went by, and then she sent me back a message basically telling me to fuck off.
Okay.
She said she sent it back and said that, don't ever contact me again, or I'll charge you with harassment or something along those lines. So that's all the contact I've had with the family.
Okay. That whole Don, and this last thing I'll say on that is that it's always been so troubling that he, Colin Miller asked that one question, why in all this time hasn't anyone that she was going to meet ever said, or why hasn't anyone ever said she was going to meet me that day? Everyone knows she was in a hurry, but no one, and we know that letter wasn't written that day, the note that she left for Don. It's just it's so seedy, man. Anyway, okay.
And Colin Miller made a great point with that, where I think the inference we can make from that, the fact that she had told people that she had something to do, somewhere to be, it seemed as though that she had someone to meet, is the way it sounded, and she ended up dead, and no one has ever come forward and said that I was that someone that she had to meet. That's a really good indication to me that the person that she went to meet, whoever that was, is indeed the person that killed her.
Right.
And that would be why you haven't heard from them.
Right. Yes. And that's, so when he said that, and I'm obviously that's why he said it, but to me, that might be like one of the most important lines in Undisclosed, independent of, all Susan, all their work, because that puts a button on it. Yeah. Who else would she'd be going to go see Don, right? I mean, it just makes all kinds of sense, and for him to anyway. All right, so I'll let that go, but I'm
just gonna leave that right here.
Yeah, I'll leave it right there because anyway, that's a whole nother show. All right, so let's talk about you and the fear that I have for you. Now, good thing you're not black, because you and all this trouble that you're making in Smith County in Texas, man. Like I'm like, dude, I worry about you, Bob. I'm like, this man is down here talking shit, causing trouble, see, and I'm like, I'm like, jokingly, I would say, we're really, good thing he's white though. Cause I mean, this white dude is really out here giving it to these white guys, these good old boys talking shit every week where they can hear and see and whatever. And you're there too, so. And we've talked about why you're in Smith County, Kenny Snow, Edward Ace, Kerry Max Cook. So we've given that background. So, but let's talk about, are you at all worried about taking on Smith County or any other municipality? I mean, the implications that, you are even investigating these cases with these, these boots on the ground. I mean, any fears or anything related to that?
I think that I have a healthy fear of it. I mean, in the same way, I get asked that question a lot. Like, are you afraid to go down there? They're going to do something, and yeah, that's certainly a concern. I mean, these people have shown that they don't value human life. That's for sure. So it's a concern, but it's something that I kind of liken it to my career as a firefighter. I was scared to death every time I went inside a fire too. But it's something that if you're going to do something good, it's a risk that you're going to have to take, and it's kind of like, if I don't do it, who's going to? With that being said, I take precautions just like I did before I went into a fire. You in a fire, you carry your air on your back, and you wear your bunker gear, and you make sure all your gear is in place to try to protect you. But at the end of the day, there's still there is still that risk factor, and that's similar to when I go down to Smith County. I take precautions. Some of them I talk about on the show. Some of them I don't. I mean, I'm always packing when I go down there.
Okay. All right.
I'm legally licensed to do that.
Right.
But I've got people that are watching out for me. I've got I document very clearly everything that I'm doing, more so than everybody sees. So because my fear has been less of somebody's going to off me when I'm down there, and more of I'm going to go down there and get framed for a murder or something.
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm worried about, because it seems unreasonable that, you would, off, like you said, but then I'm like, man, this dude's gonna, there's going to be somebody, some lady found in a barn, and fucking Bob Ruff's going to be, hemmed up. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
that's what I'm like. That's what I feel for you. So no, I got you. Okay. You probably are so well known down there now. So when you walk in, you mentioned before, like, you talk to the young ladies at the clerk's office, or the courthouse, or, wherever you need your information from. And so everyone appears to be very receptive. And so I'm trying to figure out the dynamic. So the people you talk to on the phone, or you deal with, or when you scan your documents, they're all nice and receptive. They know what you're doing, even though you're shitting all over Smith, the county they work for. But then you've got, the prosecution and the guy who acts like he doesn't know who you are, even though clearly he should know who you are. That wasn't not David Dodd. Was that Bingham? Who was that?
Bingham. Yeah.
Bingham. Yeah. What's it like when you walk in those areas and you're trying to get this information? You're just filing FOIAs, and can you go through the whole shebang?
Yeah. So Tyler, Texas, I found is a really, really interesting place. To be honest with you, somebody should make a movie about it, because it's like something you'd see in the movie, where there's like this corrupt group of people that kind of run things in that town, and nobody talks about it, but everybody knows about it.
Yeah, because I think that's where Johnny Manziel's the Manziels are from.
Yeah, it is,
too.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And they've got from what I'm told from the locals, a hell of a reputation there too. But that's another episode.
Right.
But so when I first showed up, and that's one of the things that's been really interesting, is over these months that I've been working in there, is watching the dynamic shift there. So I walk in, and here I am, this outsider. I'm this big bearded tattooed dude from Michigan come walking into the courthouse. And, it started out like to get my documents. I went through all the normal, file FOIA requests and all these things. And as I got there, I just try to talk and try to, relate with the people that I'm there. And what I found is people started to get comfortable with me, both within the courthouse and just around town. They would start to open up, and all of a sudden it starts spewing out, where people are just like, whatever you need, I want to help you. Like these people are assholes. They're if you cross these people, they will destroy you in this town. And so, me being someone coming from the outside, they've never had that done before, because anybody that ever challenged them was somebody from Tyler, and there was consequences for it.
Okay.
And that's partially why I think the Smith County DA's office doesn't know what the hell to do with me, because they have no leverage over me. Like they can't get me fired. I don't have a job. This is my job. They can't.
Right.
They can't ruin my business. They can't. I'm not there for them to do.
Yeah, right. They can't tell people not to listen to you. Yeah. You're kind of you've got some level of immunity, if you will.
Right.
I don't knock on wood though. Let's not chance it. But right.
Yeah. But in general, they really didn't know what to do with me, and I found this multiple trips there and just associating with different people and going out to business, and I've started to where now, like, I have people that I consider friends down there. I used to have to, every time I went down to take my gun with me, I had to go through probably never taken a gun through an airport, but it's a pain in the ass.
Okay.
There's a procedure for it, but it's a pain in the ass. Well, like, I have contacts in town now that I know and trust, that before I fly down there, I take it, package it up, ship my gun down to him, fly down there, drive to his house, pick it up, and little things like that. Where people trying to help out any way they can. But
interesting. Okay.
I've made friends with some of the people that are out that live out in the other side of the tracks, the poor black community. And I've made contacts with guys like Bill Cole invites me out to dinner to his farm way on the outskirts of town, where there's the poor white community over here, and then I've had the millionaire white guys in downtown Tyler that are taking me out. One of the guys after a court hearing I was in, say, I want to buy you lunch. Go meet me over there, and I want to buy you lunch. And I show up, and it's him and three of his buddies, and it was I had a $60 steak for lunch. So it's a diverse crowd, but the thing that's kind of underlying with all of them is all of them know what's going on in that office, and they've all been oppressed in their own way. The poor black people that live over here have been oppressed because they are the people that get cherry picked to basically, be the convict for every crime, so they keep their conviction rate up, whether they did it or not. And more, you want to tell you something else that's fucked up?
Go ahead.
Ed Aids' dad was murdered I think it was in 91, somewhere around there. And the police ruled it a car accident. He was found dead in his car in a car accident with a bullet hole in the back of his head. And the police ruled it a car accident. And when I talked to one of the local attorneys that I made a contact there, he chuckled and just, I mean, not that he thought it was funny, but he's just like, man, that Smith County, black men don't get murdered in Smith County. And it was just like,
wow,
what the fuck did you just say? And he's like, that's how these people operate. He said, there's a couple things you need to know about that prosecutor's office. Black men don't get murdered here. And their classic motto, or their line when they're trying to solve a crime is, come in and sit down. And you need to decide right now, do you want to be a witness or do you want to be a co-defendant? Because it's going to be one or the other. So basically they'll threaten to charge you with a crime.
Right.
If you don't give them some bullshit testimony.
To bring it kind of full circle, and that's what you believe happened with Jay Wilds and Anand's case, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there was a subtle difference there where I think that in Anand's case with Jay Wild, I think there you had some lazy police work, and they just, the lead they had was a phone record. The phone record led them to Jay. And then Jay didn't pan out, and they're just like, "Fuck it, this kid's Muslim. Let's just get him." That's kind of my opinion on that. It was.
Oh, okay.
I've seen much more. I mean, Jay had I 100% believe, and then it was confirmed when Jim Clemente and Laura Richards analyzed his interrogation tapes. He absolutely had a coerced confession. They told him I believe that they told him what to say in order to convict Adnan. And I think it was just to clear a case. Lazy, we need this one cleared. It's in the news. It was a civilian, as they call them in Baltimore. They've got 300 murders a year, but most of them are people that are in the drug trade.
Right. We for those of us who have seen The Wire, for sure, we were familiar with the term civilian for sure when it comes to the game. And folks should check out our episode with D. Watkins, author of the Cook Up from East Baltimore. You should check that episode out too. Back to Smith County though, but you're okay when you go down there. Your army you got folks helping you out, but no feedback from police or the DA when you're there, or interaction. I mean, there's no level of, I imagine some level of intimidation, or if you're at if you're at a diner. See, I'm from Dallas, so I think East Texas and Tyler, is just full of diners and small places.
Right.
But no cop cars parked out. No Smith County sheriff or cop cars parked outside. And intimidation. You haven't felt any direct, or have you felt any kind of direct feeling of any of that?
No, and to be honest with you, it surprised me because my first trip there, I was nervous as hell based on what attorneys from that area had told me. They were, it was kind of like, you need to make sure that you have a bodyguard, document your trip, make sure you go carrying whatever. And I'm like kind of laughing. They're like, no, I'm not kidding.
Right.
So, I was really, really concerned, but so what I was going to do my first trip was not tell anybody I was going because I didn't want them to know I was there.
Okay.
And so one of the attorneys that I talked to said, you need to do the opposite. You need to broadcast where you're going to be and what you're doing so that they can't set you up for something. So I was nervous going there, but what I found is the intimidation seems to go the other way. You should have seen Matt Bingham when I walked up to him after Kerry Max Cook's hearing and shook his hand. I mean, the man, he would have crawled into a hole. There was a hole there.
Right.
And it's surprising. And I think it's not really anything with me. I think it just kind of touches on more what I said earlier, which is they don't know what the hell to do with me. Because, first of all, the medium is new. The idea of doing investigative journalism through a podcast is new without having, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox News, whoever, editors tell me what I can do and can't do. Just a rogue guy that's just gonna cuss me out in front of 200,000 people this week.
Right.
They just don't know what to do, I think, with me.
Yeah, and that's the thing that it seems so ballsy because I mean, like I said, you you were talking a lot of shit. You were cussing. You will cuss them out. You will really kind of get in that butt. And I'm like, okay, Bob. All right, man. You know, be cool. But all right. So all right, we're good. I'm glad. I guess the overarching point is that level of confidence that you have to do that is good though, because you need that doggedness to really fight and truly, what's our term, be a justice warrior, you know, to truly to do that. So no, that's good. So your skill set is unique and really lends itself well to that. So that's good. So
my dad's always telling me that there's a fine line between tough and stupid. Yeah. I think I toe that line.
Right. Yeah. You got, you're teetering that all the time. Yeah. You got one foot over. Yeah. You might be one of those habitual just line jumpers where, you know, you got 1 foot on one side, 1 foot on the other. That might more, describe you better. Yeah. Cause,
yeah.
The DA in Dallas, Susan Hawk, is she's got some issues. You should, she's an alcoholic and has mental health issues, and I'm not saying anything out of school. Like it's documented. Like she's been in rehab and like she has issues. But and I still don't feel even comfortable saying that about her on these limited airwaves.
Yeah,
and you just throw a big flamethrower at all of them. But okay, all right. So I guess that's enough about Smith County. I want now to get on a couple of things that you've kind of talked about on your show. One you've mentioned before is that exoneration isn't a legal term. So I wanted you to see if you could go over that for our audience. And I know we talked about earlier about Alfred plea and setting the conviction aside when it comes to Adnan and Kerry Max Cook. But I wanted to see if you could just talk about exoneration and kind of what we're talking about there.
Well, that was something that was new for me. You know, when I was talking to Michael Ware of the Innocence Project, and we were talking about, you know, I was like, I think we can get this guy exonerated, and he kind of schooled me a little bit. He's like, well, you need to understand that what we're trying to do is get that conviction thrown out first, because exoneration is not a legal term. It's not. It's something we use to. So, and it gets thrown around in several ways. So, you could say that Adnan Syed was just exonerated, and I guess that would be okay, but it's not really a legal term. But Adnan Syed's conviction was thrown out. So he's no longer a convicted murderer, but an indictment still stands.
Okay.
Which means, so where Adnan is at right now, and where Kerry Max Cook is right now, as a matter of fact, is as though he had gotten arrested, arraigned, and arraigned by a grand jury and been indicted. And he's awaiting trial. That's the position you're at. So
are they working on bail for Adnan, or is he eligible for bail?
I think he will be. Justin will be. He said in his press conference that he's going to be making a motion for bail. I believe they either are waiting or they need to wait until after the time limit for appeal goes through with the state, where they can appeal the ruling. Because I think they can make that argument. The argument they can argue against bail is, well, this isn't even over yet. We're still appealing in the appellate process.
Okay,
but they will be making that argument for appeal for sure.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
But as far as the exoneration goes, so what we typically see is a conviction vacated, like in Adnan's case, where it's thrown out there back to that pretrial phase, but they're still, you know, on their record they were arrested and they're awaiting trial. What we're in Edward Aid's case, what we're going to look for, and what Kerry Max Cook just went through, is to go right in and file a motion for actual innocence, and that would be an attempt to get actual innocence is what we probably most people think of as an exoneration, where it's not just your conviction is set aside, the entire indictment, everything is gone. You go home, you're free, you're done, and your record would show as though you had never been arrested. You've never been charged. None of that has ever existed.
Okay.
Also, keep in mind that I'm a fireman,
right.
So I may not be the best source of information on this.
Well, no,
I think I got it.
Yeah, no, well, no, yeah. You know what? That's one thing that we have to remember, that you man, and that's what's still so crazy about all of this, is that you are a fireman. You're not like Robbie. You know, I mean, Robbie Chowdhury, Susan Smith, Colin Miller, they are attorneys. You mentioned that, Susan, this was not her field of expertise per se. Criminal law is not what any of them do, with the exception, I guess, of Colin. And he's a evidence professor. But yeah, for you to be a fire investigator, and actually, you know what? Do you approach these like you're you do approach these like you're investigating a fire that does lend some credence, and you've done so much research. But when you think about it, though, so it has only been about 14 months that you've been fully grinding away like this.
Yeah, I recorded the first Serial Dynasty episode on, I believe it was May 1st. So, about 14 months. And so a lot of it is, I'm learning as I go, because of my contact with attorneys and working with and getting information from my listeners, and working with experts. I'm getting to a point where I have obviously a much better understanding of the law than I used to. Now, I now can look at a case when people send me new cases and look and see, not just, because prior to that it was like, well, look, he's innocent, so he's out. We can get him out of there, right? But the reality of it is there's different burdens in order to make that happen. So now I can look and see, okay, what, can we file an 1107 on this, or is this an Article 64 thing?
Right.
And that's just from on the job training, I guess, experience working through these cases.
How did your family deal with, you mentioned your 4-year-old, we know you have a wife.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, but it's been a really good one. So when I made the decision to take the early retirement, because retirement's a strong word. I'm 37 years old, but in the fire service, I'd been in long enough. My pension was vested.
Right. Okay.
And, I could freeze that and just take my retirement early, anytime after 10 years. So, but when you talk about a conversation you don't want to have with your wife, I come home one day and it was after, the last 3 years of my career, I was the chief, which means I'm not kicking down doors and putting out fires anymore. I'm wearing a suit and arguing with politicians all the time and going to meetings. And I kind of lost the part about my job that I really loved was the fact that I felt like I was making a difference every day. And my job as the chief started that way, but there was a change in my board, and I felt that I wasn't enjoying going to work anymore. And it was like I'm sitting here beating my head against the wall, and it's not making a difference in anyone's life. And I don't want to mail it in for the rest of my. I don't want to spend the next 10 years of my career just mailing it in. And at about that same time, through the podcast, we were starting to really affect change, and we were starting to affect people's lives. And that's ultimately what I've always wanted to do with my life, is to at least leave an impact. And so I had to come home and tell my wife, hey, I got this great idea. I want to quit my good government job and
right.
and be a podcaster. But my wife is, I have an amazing wife. My wife, Becky, she is incredibly supportive. And I had that conversation with her, and I was like, look, I think we can make it. I think that, I'm starting to get people to want to sponsor and advertise. I think that I can still, make enough income to replace what I had at the fire department. And I want to do this. And she just told me, look, I have no doubt that you're going to do whatever you have to do to make sure that we're all taken care of. And I trust you, and I want you to do what's going to make you happy, which of course made me, probably cry like a little baby. Don't tell anybody.
Right. Now I'm starting to question your grown ass man status because you got $200 from your mother-in-law, and now you're crying like a baby in front of your wife. I don't know about your grown ass man status. We might have to pull your card, but go ahead.
Yeah. But so my background too. I have 4 kids, so my wife and I. We're a blended family. I have 2 children, and she has 2, and they range from 5. I have a 5-year-old son, a 10-year-old stepdaughter, an 11-year-old son, and a 15-year-old stepson.
Okay.
So for her to say, I know we'll be all right, was really a leap of faith on both of our parts. And of course, my wife's a hard worker too. She works her ass off and works too. But we kind of needed both incomes to make things work.
Of course.
And she basically gave me permission, or her permission to start. She gave me her blessing to go ahead and kind of follow my dream and do this. And so that's when that's when I put in my resignation. I left, decided to do this full time, and trying to remember what the actual question was that you asked me. Now,
you answered it. It was I don't even know because I'm looking at my notes.
I remember you were asking about the dealing with the travel and all.
Just the time and toll it takes on the family and during the transition, right? Yes.
So the change was, you have to remember, for other than the last 3 years, I was as a firefighter before I was the chief. I was working 24-hour shifts. So I was gone. I was not sleeping at home, and then we were really understaffed. So I was pulling a bunch of overtime. It was nothing for me to work a 72 or a 96-hour shift, once a week on top of my normal shifts. So I was being the chief though for the last 3 years. I was at least home every night. But the thing was, I was constantly, I'd get home at 6 o'clock at night, be home, have dinner, then run back out for a meeting or run back out for a fire call or whatever was going on. Where now, I work long hours. Tonight's another long night, and it's not entirely unusual for me to be working this late. But my studio is literally in my backyard. Okay. And so even during the day, if my wife will come out, sit out here and have lunch with me. The kids want to just sit and hang. If I'm not recording, my 10-year-old or my 11-year-old Quentin, he's really into what I'm doing. He listens to all my podcasts, and he's always asking questions about them. And sometimes he'll just like to come just sit out here and just hang out. And my little one Parker will do the same thing, and Becky, my wife, will come out. So they like having dad here. There's times when I got to tell them, hey, I got to record or whatever. Right. But so I'm working more, but
I've got to talk about the position of a body, and blood trauma. Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you need to get out for this. Right. Yeah. The podcast and the investigations started to take up so much time. Because for like the last 6 months, I was working 60 plus hours a week at the fire station, and then 40 plus hours a week here at night and on the weekends doing the podcast. So it was like something's got to give. I can't do this effectively and continue to work at the fire department at the same time. So that was a big part of the reason why I did what I did.
In one of your episodes, you talked with the woman who found her cousin's battered and murdered body. And that's, Eleanor Griffin. And she says that she just took the case against Ed at face value, pretty much. Ed Ace that we've been speaking of. So my question is, do you find that that's the case for most of the witnesses that you've talked to? And I know when I talked to Asia McLean about Adnan, and it's been, talked about in, a lot of the folks that, I think we've all talked to now on these cases where, once it's in the court, a lot of these witnesses don't have as much. The folks that had direct involvement during the investigation or would have kind of don't have that anymore. Even if they are called to testify, they kind of just go with what the prosecution says, as we discussed. And do you find that to be the case a lot, where people just kind of take everything at face value, take the whole, like the jury does, and as we do, the witnesses just take it as face value, or the parties involved?
A common statement that I hear a lot is like in Ed's case. Well, yeah, he's the one that killed Elnora, and I always ask them, why do you think that? And the most common response I get is, well, he was convicted, so I just assumed he did it, I guess. Because you got to think about, most witnesses have no idea what happened in the trial because they get sequestered.
Right.
So that they are in there for their little thing and they're out. They're not allowed to hear the rest of it. Ed Aitz's mother has no idea what happened in that trial because they sequestered her for the entire trial but never called her as a witness. Johnny Pryor, who was Elnora's cousin that found her body, has no idea what happened in that trial. And she's been great. Remember, I spoke with her this morning. I've kind of developed a relationship with her, and I had a question about a name that came up, and so it's kind of cool to develop that relationship. Hey, Johnny, it's Bob.
Right.
Do you know this person? But yeah, that happens a lot. Where again, it goes back to what we talked about a while ago, which is most people just have an inherent belief that the police and the prosecutors are the good guys, and that they typically get it right. And but the reality of it is they don't always.
That's so crazy. And we're all guilty of that feeling at some point or another. Obviously, now over the last 2 years, post serial, if you will, that a lot of that has changed. But as a black person specifically, it seems crazy that you would give the burden or the benefit of the doubt to the prosecution in any case. You know what I mean? Obviously you want to, because those people represent the public, air quotes, but as much goes on in policing or whatever else, it's still like, you would still be like, oh, okay, yeah, they got it right. Or, it's amazing that we just still default on that, even knowing the evidence that we know. I would venture to guess that people will listen to this episode and all of these episodes, and still it maybe put in that same position, might feel, a certain type of way because the case was presented was presented a certain way. You know what I mean? Like, in spite of even hearing and knowing, this additional information, which I guess it just speaks to how powerful that really is, just taking it at face value and just kind of going with it. So yeah, and
I think that that's a climate that is probably changing, based on what's happening.
I hope so. Right.
Yeah, what's happened. But to be honest with you, my concern is I don't want it to change the other way. What I want it to happen is for us to land in the middle where we're supposed to be. So there's years of everybody assuming the police and the prosecution are always right. Well, then we have, and myself included, these podcasts, and we have, in the media coverage of everything that's happening right now. I mean, not that the things that are happening aren't horrible, but it's being presented in a way like this is the only, that this is the norm, and it's not the norm. And so I think that's shifting people to where, okay, now I don't trust the police and the prosecution, and I don't want people not to trust those people either. What I want is for people to be objective and come in and say, I don't trust anyone, and I want to hear both sides of this and judge the case based on the evidence objectively. So it's like I fear that we're going to go from one pole to the other and back and forth rather than end up in the middle, which is where I think we should be.
Hopefully, you and Undisclosed and everybody will continue to educate. And folks, I mean, it's all about education. I think really, the more educated you are, the more balanced, and you can make the most objective decisions. So you mentioned, in listening to you for all this time, you mentioned not just spinning your wheels, and you're making actual progress. So how gratifying really is that for you? Because, as you talked about, as your job and your career changed, and becoming chief, and now you're all suited up and you're becoming the man, you're attending meetings, and you're not, you're not putting on the gear and doing your thing. So your passion, I assume, had left you a bit, and now with you've been able to kind of meld all those things into your new mission here. So how gratifying is that for you, and what kind of personal satisfaction do you get from being able to be passionate about something that is really impacting folks? How gratifying is that for you?
Well, I'm a happy crier.
Okay.
You want to continue to take the man card?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, dude, that's another debit, man. I don't know. We kill you. We got to go drink some. We got to go, when you find a DFW. We got to go kick it so we can get your card back up.
Right. Yeah. But I say that I have, Adnan, his conviction has been vacated, and that was just an incredible, amazing feeling. But because of what we're doing, I experience that emotion all the time, and it for the little things. When Kenny Snow wrote me and said that his son, because he listened to my podcast and realized, holy shit, I thought my dad was guilty all these years, so I've been ignoring him. After almost 20 years,
right.
Went to go visit him in prison, and then came back with his grandkids. When Ed H didn't even know if he was still married. And
hey, you know what? Yeah, and let's talk about that. Yeah, because you killed me with that, man. Yeah, those. Yeah, when
did you cry?
I can't remember. You know what? I can't remember if I did. I probably did, because that was heavy. I mean, because I didn't know. Who knew what she was going to say? I mean, that was heavy, man. And the fact that so you got me on that one for sure. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, those. those things, like those mean a lot to me. Those are the days that I go to bed at night and I think, like, man, whether it might have not have been getting somebody exonerated or convicting a murderer that's been on the loose, but my work today affected someone's life in a positive way, and it made a difference. Even if they don't end up getting out of prison, which of course is the ultimate goal, but it's like at least they have that. Ed. I talked to Ed this morning, and his whole countenance is changed. He's a happy guy. His wife comes and visits him now with his daughter every weekend, and you hadn't seen her in almost 2 years. And she's writing him every day, and they're trying to set up the phone so he can call her, and he's just so happy about that. And Kenny connected with his family. All these things are. It's like I have the passion back that I had when I was actively fighting fires. Where it's a little thing. It's a battle. It's not the war, but to win those little battles as we move along is it's just incredibly gratifying.
Any worry, when you are out, when you are theorizing publicly in such a large forum? I mean, with the hundreds of thousands of folks that listen to you, any worry there about naming names? You didn't say that Francis Johnson did it, but in my mind, I'm like, oh shit, he did it. You know what I mean? Because
right,
or same thing with Don. It took you a while, at least publicly, to give an opinion on this person.
That's more of the issue, because if you carefully listen to what I'm saying, and it's not you or any, it's a lot of people, kind of your brains, kind of connect the dots. But if when you listen to what I'm saying, if I'm giving a theory, I'm presenting it that way, like this is a possible theory that I think is a possible scenario. You'll never hear me say this person did it unless I have proof that this person did it.
Right.
So that it's tough, and it is in this. Again, this is a new medium for doing this, and I take heat all the time for exactly what you're talking about, and I guess it's a judgment call on my part, and maybe I get it right, maybe I get it wrong sometimes, but basically the way that I'm operating is my sounding board, my war room for the investigation is the listeners. When I'll put those theories out there that I think this, I'll get 400 emails in with that are people saying, well, what about this, or couldn't this be the case, or have you thought about this, but doesn't this contradict that? And so that's by putting that out to the audience and getting that feedback, that helps me further develop and gives me all these different viewpoints and mindsets and trains of logic to try to get down the right path. But I am very careful about if I'm even suggesting that someone is a possible suspect, I've got a whole lot of reason to do that before I do it. I don't just do it willy-nilly.
That puts me at ease a bit. Not that I was real worried, but like I said, sometimes where I'm like, all right, Bob, let me make sure I'm with you on that. But no, that
right.
Last couple things, I guess, if you want to tell folks how they can find you, keep in touch with you, your show, if they can contribute to the cause.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can, whether you're iTunes or Stitcher or information on the website, which is truthandjusticepod.com. Make sure you put the pod at the end, truthandjusticepod.com. But there's every time I put out an episode, the case documents are on there, the source documents. You kind of help investigate yourself. There's a contact button there, or you can always email it, theories@truthandjusticepod.com. If you have any comments, thoughts, theories, or ideas. As far as interaction, I try to be very active on social media and really interact with the listeners. And if so, Twitter is the place I prefer to do that. I do have a Facebook page. You can follow that, but I fucking hate Facebook. But the Twitter handle is @TruthJusticePod.
Okay.
So find me any of those ways, and thank you for having me on the show. It's been fun chatting with you.
Hey, welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed that conversation with Bob as much as I did. Make sure you follow him, support the Truth and Justice Pod and his mission. Support the Army. If you're a member of the Army, congratulations. What you guys do is really important, and I'm glad we got to talk about that. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Vocal Report. You can send us an email, comments, suggestions, feedback, criticism, anything you have. It's vocalreport@gmail.com. Go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Vocal Minority Report. Leave a like, leave a comment. We want to make that a forum for people who support this movement. And if you like us, go to iTunes, subscribe, leave a rating, review, tell a friend. We're on all the platforms, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere you get your podcasts. Use the hashtag The Vocal Minority. Talk to us, and we'll see you next episode. Peace.